The NHL's Pacific Division has become a lot more competitive this year heading into the 2022-2023 season. It may even be one of the most log-jammed divisions in the NHL this year. Follow me as we tier rank all 8 teams in the division, and I give you Coach Ryan D and Hot Garbage Sports reasoning as to why he thinks the rankings of your favorite 8 Pacific Division teams are the way they are. So why is the Pacific Division log jammed, and why are Coach Ryan D's rankings the way they are? Here's why. We're going to classify our rankings into 5 different tiers. We're going to talk about those who have a chance to be the division winner. We're going to talk about those that have a chance to be a 2-3 contender. How about a 4-5 wild card? The wild card bubble teams, as well as the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. And starting in with tier number 5, the lowest tier, the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, comes the Seattle Kraken. Seattle's roster has made a lot of changes in the last year under Ron Francis, but I still believe this team is in trouble when it comes to their standing and ranking for next year. But things aren't all doom and gloom. Their draft this year was incredible. The fact that Shane Wright fell right into their lap, into their lap down in Seattle means that Seattle is going to be playing with Matty Beniers and likely Shane Wright. Yes, I have Shane Wright over Alex Weinberg. You can take a look at the roster that is projected by Daily Faceoff over here to the right. They're just placeholders. It's way too early in the season to determine what the roster is going to be, but I have Beniers and Wright making this team immediately this year and packing a 1-2 or a 1-3 punch. You don't draft a guy that high and leave him on the bench, and I think Wright's aptitude for the game makes him NHL ready. Just my opinion. Let's wait and see. Don't be too down on the fact too that they may end up in the basement as a bottom 5 team in the NHL this year, because if they do happen to land that coveted number 1 overall draft pick, Bedard, Beniers, and Wright is extremely scary. And they put a few pieces together to improve their team to be ready for those young players such as Andre Burakovsky. Jordan Eberle is always a nice player. Jaden Schwartz remains here with the team. Yanni Gourde, could you imagine a world where Yanni Gourde is their 4th line center behind Beniers, Wright, and Bedard? My goodness. This could end up being a really good looking team in the future. But right now, goaltending questions with Grubauer. I'm not going to go ahead and anoint them any further than number 8. Moving on to our wild card bubble team. There's only one team in here, and it's the San Jose Sharks. I have the Sharks at 7th in this division. My goodness. A team with Timo Meier, one of the most talented players in the NHL, ends up 7th in this division. But that's because when you look at the roster here, outside of Hertl, Meier, and Karlsson, I don't know what else is going on here. You've got goaltending prospects in Capo Kakinen. Look, he could be something. He was supposed to be something over there in Minnesota. Maybe he anoints himself as a very strong starter, but if not, you got James Reimer backing him up in the net. Outside of that, this is a team in full transition, in my opinion, and I think the Sharks are in for a little bit of a tough year. However, when you've got Hertl and you've got Meier, you've got a little bit of scoring talent, and their defense aren't too bad either. They could surprise me, and they could compete for a wild card. That's why they're not in the basement. That's why this division is log jammed. Now, the more realistic wild card chasers are going to be the Ducks and the Vegas Golden Knights. Yes, I have the young up-and-coming Anahiem Ducks next to the stacked veteran team of the Vegas Golden Knights. How could you end up doing this, Coach Ryan D? Well, starting with the Vegas Golden Knights, let's just say I don't believe in them. I actually believe Kelly McCrimmon has played too hard as a general manager at this point. I believe their better days are behind them. Yes, they are loaded with talent, and talent means Stanley Cups. We've seen it with Colorado. We've seen it with Tampa Bay, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about talent on this roster and on this channel. But when I take a look at this team, Jack Eichel is unproven as a winner. One of the most talented players in the NHL, unproven winner. Mark Stone, we don't know if his back issue is going to be any better next year after having surgery. Robin Lehner, not here anymore. Marc-Andre Fleury, 2 years gone. You are running a very scary tandem in net, and we saw what happened when Flower ended up leaving this team. Goaltending carries you a long way, and there is no goaltending in net right now for the Vegas Golden Knights. Yes, you have Pietrangelo. Yes, you have Theodore. Yes, you have Martinez, one of the best defensive cores in the NHL as a top 3, but not even a top defense. Just ask the Seattle Kraken, who had an above average defense and couldn't do anything in front of Philip Grubauer. I just don't see this team doing it. Sure, you got Phil Kessel. Nice little signing to come in, hot dog jokes aside. You've got Marchessault, Carlson, and Riley Smith still there. But at the end of the day, when I look at this team, I think it's thin. I think they're a few injuries away from being in complete disarray, and they don't have goaltending. However, with the talent they have on the roster, they could still go ahead and crack a playoff spot. The Ducks last year were not one of my favorite teams heading in. I actually said the California teams were in a lot of trouble, and I got it mostly right with the exception of the surprise that is the LA Kings. But let's talk about the Ducks here. Trevor Zegras and Troy Terry are going to be featured up top, but I think we're all super excited for Mason McTavish, aren't we? These are going to be 3 players to watch in the NHL for quite some time, and McTavish may be the second best player on the Ducks very, very shortly. Zegras is always going to carry them up top, but McTavish is something special. They went out and they signed Dylan Strome and Frank Vetrano. I really like their top 6 now at this point. When you throw Henri into this mix, they have a lot of depth on their third line with a guy like Jacob Silverberg down there. I really like that. Jacob, whatever, Silverberg down there. And their defense is greatly improved with Klingberg and Kulikov coming in. Drysdale is still the stud back there, in my opinion. Cam Fowler will never get the credit that people think he deserves down in Anaheim being a number 1 defenseman. But when you have Fowler, Drysdale, Klingberg, and then you go ahead and add Kulikov and Shattenkirk to that mix, that's pretty good. I like the Ducks. I like Gibson to be able to rebound with a defensive core in front of him. This team could surprise some people and even crack the top 3. Now we're moving into the top 4. So the teams that are going to be competing for the 2-3 spot, I think, are going to be LA and Vancouver. Look, everybody saw LA coming on this list, so let's go ahead and talk about them first. The Kings had a great playoff run against the Oilers last year. Considering the injuries that they sustained, they took them right to 7 games. So if the Kings can get healthy with Jonathan Quick in net and load management using Cal Peterson, this could end up being a team that could do damage in playoffs. Quick has still shown that he is still a top tier goalie when it comes to the playoffs. And if Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson can go into the playoffs not injured, this could actually end up being a scary defensive core. When I take a look at Sean Durzi is one of my favorite up and coming players under the age of 25. I think this guy's an absolute monster back there on defense and a big future piece of the LA Kings. He's even a right now with the LA Kings. So I like those 3 defensemen. When I look up front with the addition of Fiala to play with Kopitar, again, if these guys can go in healthy, they're going to be awesome. Fiala is a wonderful addition to this team, and a team that I thought was going to be in full rebuild has technically rebuilt their team with veterans. You take a look at the Fiala Deneau additions this year, and that's pretty impressive. Go ahead, throw Victor Arvidsson in there, and let's not forget about Iafallo, and this team could do some damage. Big question is, can Quentin Byfield finally take a step forward, or is he forever going to be a bottom line checker with this team? Either way, there's enough depth on this roster to win the division, but I do have them more realistically in position 2 or position 3 this year. The Canucks made almost no changes this year, and for a team that had 92 points last year, how am I putting them in the same breath as the LA Kings? Well, that coaching change that they ended up bringing in with Boudreau was huge. The big question is, what are they going to do with their captain, Bo Horvat? It is really in flux to have a captain not signed after this year, and what do they end up doing at the trade deadline? What do they end up doing with this team? No team has won a Stanley Cup without a captain since 1972. We just discussed that with the Winnipeg Jets. But taking a look at this top line, the fact that JT Miller and his newly minted contract right up there with Besser and Peterson, Elias, hello, my name is Elias, has a really nice top 3 for this team. Bo Horvat's one of my favorite players in the NHL. I would love to see a trade for Mark Scheifele and Bo Horvat if Horvat would re-sign with the Winnipeg Jets. So let's just get that done there, Canadian teams. It would be nice. Now, I really like the signing of Ilya Mikheyev. I think he's one of the most underrated penalty killers and middle 6 forwards in the NHL. He had an awesome year with the Leafs last year. I think you should be excited about this player coming in. And then when I take a look at Hughes, Shen, Ekman Larson, and Tyler Myers, there's no one really here that stands out that I go, yes, this is the guy I want, with the exception of Quinn Hughes. Pullman, absolute dust, one of the biggest overpays there are. But defensemen aside, when you have Thatcher, Demko in net, this guy actually may be approaching top 5 elite goalie in the NHL if he isn't there already, and a goalie can take you quite far. Taking a look at the fact that you have Tanner Pearson and Curtis Lazar playing on your fourth line, don't sleep on this team. I think this team is either wild card or may even surprise some people and crack the top 3 with their new coach and few new additions. Moving on to the div winners, baby. The Battle of Alberta. One of these teams is going to take this division, aren't they? At least that's what it looks like going in. You got the Oilers and you got the Flames as 1-2. Put them in any order you want, but I have the Oilers slightly above the Flames. So let's go ahead and talk about the Calgary Flames this year. They went from joke of the NHL, where you felt bad for them, you felt sad for them, to one of the best off seasons I've ever seen. You lose your best 2 players and you bring in a guy like Huberdeau, Weegar, and Kadri into the mix. Really well done by Brad Treliving. Isn't enough, and are they better than last year? Only time will tell. We'll have to take a look. Personally, I'd still rather have Gaudreau and Tkachuk, and I know Flames fans are going to say, good riddance, hit the road. I would too if I was a diehard Flames fan growing up in the city of Calgary, but I'm not. They left your city, they left your team. We're on to bigger and better things, but I still do question the fact that those 3 players, are they really better than the other 2? Let's take a look and see what happens this season. But regardless, the fact that you have Huberdeau, Lindholm, and Toffoli, and we all know Toffoli is a Daryl Sutter guy up there. Nazem Kadri pulling up the second line center, moving Backlund down to the third line. That gives you a really nice 3-punch down the middle. Mangiapane has that brand new contract and that scoring swagger. Coleman, please step up and play the game like you did with the Tampa Bay Lightning down below. And then you go ahead and take a look at the defensemen. This is the pride and joy of the team. Hanifin, Anderson, Weegar, Tanev, Killington, and Zadorov. I love this defensive core. This is the best defensive core in the NHL this year. And Jacob Markstrom can take you as far as you want to go unless you're playing the Oilers. This guy's got to learn to stop the blue and copper if they want to win the division. And speaking of the blue and copper, for the first time in hot garbage sports history, I am giving the Edmonton Oilers credit for their depth up front. When you have a team that has 2 of the best players in the NHL, Connor McDavid and Leon Drysdale, I think McDavid and Makar are 1 and 2. I actually have Makar closing in on McDavid, but it's still McDavid. Makar's got a little more work to do. Yes, he won the cup. Yes, he had a couple nice battles against McDavid, but McDavid still has the resume to get it done. Drysdale is a nice punch here, but when we take a look at all the moves that Ken Holland ended up making this year, getting players under the cap, we still need Ryan McLeod to be re-signed. He is a very important piece to this puzzle. What will he end up doing with Jesse Puljujarvi? He didn't want to lose him for nothing. We'll end up seeing how that goes. Kane comes in a nice deal. Hyman, McDavid, we all know how good this line's going to be. Nugent Hopkins, Draisaitl, Yamamoto likely slated in to be the second line, but then we have to take a look at a couple players that may end up sneaking into this roster, like Bourgault or Dylan Holloway. These 2 guys could end up displacing some players on this roster, so we'll see. I think Shore still ends up being up there. I think Fogle, McLeod are still safe, but what do you do with Puljujarvi? Back on the point, Nurse should be healthy this year. He was very, very injured last year, but that's the risk when you pay a guy $9.2 million. Cody CC back there, Kulak and Bouchard, really nice top 4. Broberg should make this roster along with the power play specialist and Tyson Barrie. Don't get on him too much, Edmonton fans, thinking that young players like Bouchard need to go ahead and step in on the power play over Tyson Barrie. Barrie's your power play point man. This is the guy you want running it back there with Darnell Nurse on 1 and 2. Keep him. Don't trade him. And then finally, Jack Campbell joins the team. You all know my opinion about Jack Campbell. He's a guesser, and when he's hot, he's amazing, and when he's not hot, he's not very good. So you basically have a younger Mike Smith back in net this year. However, that can take you to the promised land if he gets hot at the right time. All right, so here's our final rankings. We got the Oilers and the Flames competing for the division title. I have the Oilers on top of the Flames. Then we've got the Kings and we've got the Canucks competing for 2-3. I've got the Kings on top of the Canucks. Then we've got the Ducks and the Knights. I got the Knights falling due to morale, injury, and no goaltending. Then we've got the Sharks, who, yes, have a few talented players, but I just don't see them in the same mix as the top 4 or 5 in this division. And then we have the Seattle Kraken lowly down there on the bottom, but don't sleep on them for too long because I think they will be flipping in the next 2 or 3 years, especially if they hit that Bedard sweepstakes. All right, team, Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join. And if you're watching this video on the day it drops, stay tuned tomorrow for our Central Division rankings. Or if you caught it a little bit late, why don't you take a look at our Central Division rankings right here.